A few years ago, when I was struggling with my mental health, I went to see an elder, a shamanic practitioner, at a time when I was pretty anxious and overwhelmed. And I'd spent about 2 weeks cycling through stories about why I was anxious, what was causing it, what it all meant, just going round and round in my head. And when we got on the call, he asked me simply, "How do you feel?" And I went straight into the stories, everything that was happening, everything I was carrying, everything I've been trying to figure out. He let me go on for a few moments, and then he said quietly, "Respectfully, I asked you how you felt. I didn't ask you for your story." I laughed a little, and then I launched back into more stories. Eventually, he grew a little impatient. He told me to close my eyes, and he asked me to feel what was happening in my body and to tell me what was there. And so I named some tightness in my chest and a constriction in my throat, and he said, "Good. Now breathe and just stay with that." And a few moments later, something shifted. I could feel the energy starting to move. And the realization hit me with real clarity. The feeling I'd been refusing to be with was what was driving every story in my mind. So 2 weeks of cycling these stories, and it dissolved in minutes. Not because I finally found the right explanation, but because I stopped trying to explain it and simply allowed myself to feel it. Today's video is about that, about why emotions get trapped in the body, why the stories keep cycling, and what it actually looks like to work with it. If you're new here, my name is Pat Divilly. I'm the founder of the Journey the Breath Breathwork School, a student and practitioner of body and breath-based therapies, and the best-selling author of the books Shadow Work and Fit Mind. On this channel, I talk about what it actually takes to change, not just to understand, but to genuinely change how you feel, how you relate, and how you live. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, be sure to subscribe and stick around. This video is for the person who's done a lot of the work, maybe the journaling or the therapy or the personal development, maybe years of this type of work, and who can articulate their patterns with real precision. So trace things back to their childhood with what feels like a lot of clarity, but still finds themselves cycling through the same story, the same reaction, the same place. So if that sounds familiar, I want to offer you today not a new framework to understanding yourself, but a different question entirely. Not what does this mean, but where is this in my body? And that shift is smaller than it sounds, and it changes everything. There's a model that I return to again and again in this type of work, and it comes from the tradition of body-based therapies, a lineage that has spent over a century exploring the relationship between the body and emotional healing. And it describes our inner life as three concentric layers. So the outermost layer is thinking. This is where most of us spend most of our lives, analyzing, planning, narrating, interpreting, and explaining. And to be clear, thinking isn't the enemy. It's an incredible tool. The problem isn't that we think. The problem is that thinking tends to be the only place we spend time. The middle layer is feeling. So this is where the real material lives, the emotions, the sensations, the body's held history. But for most people, this layer has developed a kind of hardened surface, not because anything's wrong with them, but because somewhere along the way, feeling became unsafe. And the mind on the outside layer became an extraordinary protector. So we learned to stay there in the thinking layer instead. And at the core, the innermost layer is being, not a spiritual concept, not something you achieve, but a felt experience of being fully here in this body, in this moment. Most people have glimpsed this, but very few people have learned to live from it. Now, here's the thing about personal development, and I include myself in this. Most of the tools that we've been given, the journaling, talking therapy, even a lot of the mindfulness as it's currently taught, are thinking layer tools. They help us to understand our feelings rather than actually feel them, actually have those feelings. And understanding is genuinely valuable. I'm not dismissing it, but understanding isn't the same as integrating. One of my teachers described this so clearly that I've never forgotten it. He said something happens in your body, a collection of sensations, and then you give it a name. So maybe you call it grief or fear or anger or anxiety. And then as soon as you've given it a name, you go straight to your head and you start asking, why am I feeling this? What does it mean? Where does it come from? What should I do about it? And we swim in the stories then, sometimes for years, rather than simply being with the part that was calling for our attention in the first place, the sensations in the body, the thing that was actually asking to be felt. I spent years understanding myself. I could map my patterns with real precision, and I would have that clarity and then find myself back in the same dynamic, the same reaction, the same place. because the nervous system hadn't been updated. The body, my body, was still holding what my mind had learned to explain. So, how do emotions actually get trapped in the body? How do they get into the body in the first place? There's two main pathways that most of us will have experienced. The first is trauma. So, when something happens that's too overwhelming to fully process in the moment, the brain does something really intelligent and really protective. It offloads the feeling into the body. The experience gets stored somatically in the soma, held in the muscles, the connective tissue, the fascia, the nervous system, rather than being fully felt and completed. So this is a survival mechanism. The brain's essentially saying, this is too much for us to process right now. We'll hold it here until we feel safe enough to feel it. The difficulty is that for many people, that moment of safety never quite arrives. The second pathway is conditioning, and this one can be more subtle. So as children, we're extraordinarily perceptive. We read the room constantly. We learn very quickly what emotions are welcome in our family system and what emotions are not, what's safe to express and what needs to be suppressed. So maybe tears were dismissed, maybe anger was punished, maybe showing vulnerability led to ridicule or silence or withdrawal of love. And so we learned, often very young, to keep certain feelings out of sight, to suppress them, not because they weren't real, but because expressing them felt dangerous. The result of both pathways is the same. So emotion that was never allowed to complete, that was interrupted mid-cycle, gets stored in the body, doesn't disappear. Instead, it waits. And the longer it waits, the more pressure it generates. And the more pressure that is, the more the mind creates stories to stay away from it. This is why the stories keep us cycling. So the mind's not broken, it's doing exactly what it learned to do, protecting you from the feeling that got decided somewhere along the way was too much to be with. So this cycling of stories that I talk about isn't weakness, it's intelligence. When the mind builds a narrative around a feeling, it's trying to make the feeling more manageable, explainable, containable. If I can understand why I feel this, maybe I can think my way out of it. The problem is that the feeling isn't in the story, it's in the body. And no amount of explanation resolves what lives below the level of explanation. So this is the central limitation of a purely cognitive approach to emotional healing. The insight lands, the clarity arrives, but the nervous system remains unmoved because the nervous system doesn't update through understanding. It updates through experience and through feeling. Here's a simple way you might think about this. If you have a wound on your hand, you can understand everything about wounds, the biology, the healing process, the best treatment protocols. But the wound doesn't heal because you understand it. It heals because the body does what the body does when given the right conditions. And I think emotional healing works the same way. The conditions the body needs aren't more analysis. The body needs presence. The body needs safety, and the body needs a willingness to feel. And I want to be honest here because I've lived this myself. Turning toward a feeling you've been running from isn't comfortable. The mind will resist. It'll offer you another story, another distraction, another very compelling reason as to why now isn't the right moment. But that resistance is not evidence that you're doing it wrong. It's evidence that you're getting close to something real. So, what does it look like to actually work like this and work with this? The shift is to go from story to sensation. And it starts with one simple redirection. Instead of trying to figure out what does this mean, ask yourself, where is this in my body? So sensation is the language of emotion, not the label that we put on it, not the story that we wrap around it, but the raw physical experience underneath. Maybe the tightness in the chest or constriction in the throat, or the heaviness in the belly, or the restlessness in the legs. When we learn to start dropping into sensation, rather than immediately launching into story, something different becomes possible. So the first step I would encourage is to simply drop in and describe. So close your eyes and notice what's actually happening in your body. And describe it like a scientist. Not I feel anxious, but there's a tightness in my chest. Slightly to the left, it's about the size of a fist. It's warm, slightly pulsing quality. The more specific and sensory you can be, the more you're actually in the body rather than thinking about the body. Now the second step is to stay with it. Not to fix it, not to understand it, not to make it go away, just to be with it. Breathing, present, and curious. This is where most people need support because the instinct to flee can be very strong. The mind will offer thoughts and interpretations and distractions. And you can notice that, but simply come back to the sensations. And what most people find when they actually do this and stay with the sensations is that the sensation is a lot less overwhelming than the avoidance of it had suggested. And when you stay with it, it begins to move. Not always immediately, but it does begin to shift. And so the energy that was locked in the body begins to complete. One important note is that the work is best done gradually. If you've significant trauma, start small. So work at the edges of what you can tolerate, not at the center of the most overwhelming thing. So the goal over time is to strengthen your capacity and widen your capacity to be with sensation, not to overwhelm yourself all at once. You might think of it as building a relationship with your own body. You wouldn't start a relationship demanding everything all at once. You build trust slowly, and the body, when given that trust, will begin to open. At the start of this video, I shared the story of the elder who had me check in with what was happening in my body. And what he did for me in that conversation was simple. He didn't engage with my stories. He didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer me any new frameworks or a better interpretation. He just kept bringing me back to the body. Close your eyes. What's there? Breathe and stay with it. And what shifted in just a few moments hadn't shifted in weeks before that. Not because my stories were wrong, but because the feeling was never in the stories. It was here in the body, waiting to be met. I want to offer you the same thing now. If you're willing, just for a moment, I invite you to close your eyes and to feel into your body, not to what you're thinking, but to what you're sensing, what you're feeling in your body. So just notice what sensations are present, what part of the body might be calling for some attention, and bring some curiosity to the sensations in your body. Is there a sense of warmth or coolness? Is there a certain shape or texture? How would you describe the sensations that you're experiencing in this moment? And can you just stay for a few moments without trying to change, without trying to fix, without trying to interpret, just staying with the raw sensations of the body, turning toward rather than turning away from yourself? And just notice how that is. And that's it. That's the practice. And that's where the work lives. Not in the explanation, but in this willingness to just feel the body, to be with what's here. If today's video resonated, please do subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming. And if you want to go deeper into this body-based approach to transformation, check out journeythebreath.com. Take care of yourselves. Grá Mór.